I'm Alan Bailey, and I'm the CEO of the Center for Learning Impact. And with me is Lynette.
Hi, everyone.
First of all, before getting into the details of the model and how the model came about, Lynette's going to go through some of the finer details of the model. We call this Beyond Kirkpatrick, but of course that refers to Donald Kirkpatrick. The Kirkpatrick model is the #1 evaluation model out there. The Kirkpatrick model is a rear view picture of the learning that you're doing. It looks after the training is being conducted and delivered. It looks at whether or not it was successful. And we've put evaluation at the very beginning, and we want to make it predictive. Let's talk about who we are. We come to this with decades of evaluation. We've done hundreds of learning evaluations, major national evaluations, international evaluations, and with some leading global clients. So what really, I think, differentiates us from the rest of the evaluation community is the deep learning design experience that we have. We've designed hundreds of hours of all delivery modes. Dr. Lynette Gillis is the author of the Quality Standards for Evaluating the Quality of Training, and this was published by McGraw-Hill, and that's a differentiator. We also do research. Although we evaluate and design, we're also at the leading edge of research, and we've done quite a number of international studies and national studies, and we're going to be talking about at least one of those. These are the organizations that are using high-impact evaluation. We'd like to signal out two organizations, and one of them is Harvard Business. We've been their evaluators for a decade and a half, pretty much. And they actually were the first organization to adopt our evaluation model after doing quite an extensive due diligence. Scotiabank is a Fortune 500 company, Canadian company, and they have adopted the model and are now using it worldwide, evaluating. I'll talk a little about that later on, some 700 courses and counting, and they're using them in 50 countries. But the main thing about Scotiabank is they took 2 years of due diligence looking at the various evaluation models and decided to adopt ours. And just this week, they've translated all our materials into Spanish because they're pretty busy in Central America, Mexico, and South America. Canada, it's becoming pretty much the #1 evaluation model for many of the government departments. So let me just talk a little about how it came about. We developed this model. We were very fortunate about a decade ago to be given this opportunity. The federal government in Canada was trying to encourage training. So they were wanting to do a study to show entrepreneurs and organizations that training indeed delivers value. And the highest level of evaluation you can do is return on investment. And we're pretty adept at return on investment evaluations. So we won the contract to do this, and it was an amazing opportunity. We were able to study over a 5-year period the effectiveness of training in 22 organizations, major organizations like Logitech, Boeing Aerospace, and WestJet, a major airline in Canada. So one of the key criteria was that your training programs were delivering positive ROI. And so all the organizations that we recruited, we did so because they felt that their programs were successful, effective, and delivering positive ROI to the organization. But after a period of time, we started realizing that actually, in fact, less than half of those organizations that we recruited actually got positive ROI. And some of them did actually rather poorly. So that was a shocker. But the thing was, because we evaluated these programs using uniform tools and done the evaluation in a systematic way, we were able to see what was amazing, what worked, and importantly, just as important, what didn't work. So when we finished, and after the 22 studies we produced, we started taking a look at them and thinking, you know, I wonder what is it about those programs that were successful, that delivered high ROI? What made them successful? And as the more we looked at it, we got an idea that we could reverse engineer this evaluation process so we could actually develop an evaluation system. Really, it's an impact monitoring and an impact management system where we can do things at the beginning to make sure that the training is successful. So that's why we come up with the high impact evaluation model. That's how it came about. And we wanted that evaluation model as we designed it to be forward-looking, predictive, and proactive. In other words, if you're not doing well, can we do something to make the program get back on track? The goal of this model is to help drive and maximize impact of the training, not just to measure it after the fact. We wanted it to be a simple and ready-to-use framework with dashboards for results at a glance so that you can communicate the impact of the program to all stakeholders, not only those who know training evaluation. So this is our evaluation model. At the heart of it is the learning value chain. And with this is our framework for the model. This is the backbone of the high impact evaluation model. And with this learning value chain, we hope that our training builds new capabilities in the learners, and this capability is transferred to the job to improve job performance. And as a result of that, we want to improve organizational results, business results, or strategic outcomes. And possibly as a result of that, we will also deliver positive ROI. This is the first element of our evaluation program, and it's called impact mapping. And impact mapping is basically a roadmap of the results you hope to achieve from training. It improves alignment, which is creating a clear line of sight between what happens in training, what happens on the job, and how the organization benefits. We also have another tool, which is an electronic quality assurance tool, and this tool will help you red flag if there's any problems. It's something that you'd want to use early on when you can make changes, when the cost of making the changes and the ease of making the changes are easiest. We've also developed a set of ready-to-use evaluation templates, and with these templates, you'll be able to see whether or not you've built new capability or whether or not this capability is transferred to the job. These evaluation tools also come with diagnostic instruments, so if things are not turning out the way you wanted them, you can drill down and find out what's wrong and do something about it. And finally, one of the big bugbears of training evaluation is reporting. We wanted a reporting system that makes it really easy for anyone to see whether or not the training is successful without reading big reports, and it's a great tool for communicating to management. And with this dashboard, you also have red flags and yellow flags to say these are the areas where you're having most of the problem. So I want to take a few moments to talk about the learning value chain, which, as I said, is the backbone of the high impact evaluation model. We developed the learning value chain as a way of structuring our evaluations for the big Investing in People project, and we've been using it successfully ever since. We've found that the learning value chain is an easy framework to use with senior management. It requires little explanation and it communicates well, and we've been using it successfully for about a decade now. Now, the value chain concept, of course, comes from, for those of you in the training world, it comes from the Harvard business professor Michael Porter. And we borrowed this concept as a way of thinking about and investigating the value that training delivers to the organization. It builds on the work of Donald Kirkpatrick, Jack Phillips, and Robert Brinkerhoff. And in this framework, we see learning triggering a chain of critical outcomes. In the first place, we hope we'll develop new capability in the learner. And by capability, we mean learning and intentionality. In the first place, we hope they've learned something. They've enhanced their skills, increased their knowledge, or changed their attitude. But secondly, and equally important, we hope they've developed the intentionality to use that new learning back on the job. And if we've been successful at building capability in the learners, we expect that this will transfer to the next link in the chain, transfer and improve job performance. At this stage, we expect that the learning will be used back on the job, and it'll make a difference. The learners will be able to do things they've never done before, or they'll be able to do the same things better. Now, if the program has been successfully and carefully aligned to the organizational outcomes, business, or strategy, we expect this will increase the next link in the chain, organizational results. As a result of this, the enhanced job performance will improve our organizational outcomes. And if it's dollars and cents, it will improve revenue or improve strategy. And if the value of the training to the organization, if it's a financially oriented program, the value is greater than the cost of the training, we expect this result in positive ROI. In other words, the net benefits are improved, exceed the cost. Now, as I say, this is the backbone of the high impact evaluation methodology. And we do everything we can to keep this chain intact. We'll find, for example, if you fail to build capability, chances are this will impact job performance and impact all the way your chances of being successful further down the line are being reduced if you fail at any one of those links. But the great news is we've found from 24 research projects that if you're successful in building capability, for example, then your likelihood of having successful job performance, successful transfer to the job, has been increased. And consequently, the likelihood of improving organizational results in ROI are also increased. So the whole high impact evaluation model is predicated on keeping this chain intact. And we do everything we can to make sure that this chain does not break at any link, and it delivers the results that you hope to get from your training. Let me talk about impact mapping. This is the first tool you can use in the model. Impact mapping is an important tool because it helps you with that critical task of alignment, creating a clear line of sight between what happens in training, what they do on the job, and how the training will benefit. This is what an impact map looks like. It's basically a concise description of the results you hope to see at all levels in the learning value. In the first case, under capability, what knowledge, skills, attitudes, and intentions the learner develops as a result of attending the training. And how will this impact job performance? What skills will they demonstrate? What actions will they take? And how will things change? And finally, how is the organization going to benefit? These maps are developed in a collaborative meeting involving key stakeholders. So another tool, an important tool, which is the quality assurance tool. And this tool is actually something that's been developed for over 2 decades and been used. And it's a great, quick way of assessing the value of training. It has been endorsed by the HIE as well as the I4PL. These are both the US training organizations. And it's a great tool because it's easy to use and it helps you easily access the critical design factors that create quality benchmarks for each of your program. In other words, each of those criteria, and there's about 24 of them, each of those criteria have been vetted throughout the learning communities in North America. And if your program fails in any one of those areas, you've got something you've got to focus your attention on. It's being used as an early warning radar because you'll spot any big problems in your design. You'll spot this early on with this. And currently, it's being used by a lot of organizations, mostly in Canada, for example, for selecting new programs from vendors. This gives them, if you've got an RFP out there, several programs are vying for your attention. This is one way of helping filter out those programs that have the least amount of problems and that are likely to deliver impact. So organizations are now using it throughout Canada and the federal government for setting quality benchmarks for each of your programs, for your department or for the organization in general. At this point, we've got the ready-to-use evaluation tools, and I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Lynette Gillis.
Okay, Al's been talking about planning evaluation. I'm going to take you a little deeper here to conducting evaluation and what it is we do. Now, we don't advise that you evaluate all your programs at every link in that learning value chain. The intensity of the evaluation for any one program depends in our system on the fundamental purpose of that program and how that program delivers value to the organization. So to help evaluators make that determination, we have a very simple classification system that we call our 3 buckets of impact. So we divide all of training into 3 buckets here. In this first bucket, that's all the training that you do to get folks ready to work in your organization. The next bucket is all the training that you do to run the organization. And in that final bucket, this is the training you do to advance or improve it. So in that first bucket, I put programs like your typical HR orientation, some or most of the compliance programs you may have to do, and foundational courses. And I think of these as courses that are largely knowledge-based or awareness, usually preceding some sort of skill building. So in each of these instances, your primary purpose is just to build capability. You want your participants to learn something and be ready and willing to apply that learning back on the job. However, you don't have expectations beyond that. There may never be immediate need or opportunity to apply that learning, but it's training that you have to do. So in this instance, our learning value chain has just one link. Your primary purpose is to build capability or readiness. So this kind of program, we evaluate only at the capability link. In the second bucket, these are all the programs that you do to maintain the processes and the operations in your organization. You probably need field workers and analysts and doctors and nurses. They have to know their job and do them well. Without them, your organization simply doesn't function. So this is that big bucket of training that we do to build new job skills and proficiencies, to enhance those skills or competencies, or refresh them. So in this instance, our learning value chain has 2 links. We need, of course, to build capability, but this time it's also important that we support the transfer of that capability to the workplace where it impacts people's jobs and the way that they do those jobs. So bucket 2 programs, we evaluate at both links. First, to see if we've built capability, and then to see if we've, at the second link there, improved job performance. In this final bucket, these are all the programs that we do, not just keep your organization functioning or the doors open, but it's more strategic programs that you're doing, perhaps to save the organization money, to make it more productive, more profitable, to support missions, critical missions, mandates, or corporate priorities, or to achieve other intangibles, and I'm sure you have many in your situation, that you can't put a dollar figure on, but are nonetheless important, like client loyalty, public trust. In this instance, our learning value chain has 3 links. We need to build capability, of course, support the transfer of that capability to the workplace to impact job performance, and then as a consequence of that improved job performance, and the words are important there, as a consequence of that change in performance, achieve the organizational results of the kind that I've just described. So bucket 3 programs we would evaluate ideally at all 3 links and possibly conduct an ROI study. I need to just add another point here, though, is that while the kind of program is important to our bucket classification, you also need to consider the context in which that program is being launched. Sometimes a program is bucket 1, but in another context it could be bucket 3. I'll give you the example of a little while back, I evaluated an HR orientation program, which is typically bucket 1. You're evaluating to see if you've built capability. But in this instance, that program was being entirely redesigned. It was for a large government organization because they had been having a terrible problem with their turnover. People were leaving within 6 months of joining the department. So the redesign of this program was now being done, not just to build capability, but it was really a part of a strategy to address a business issue there of turnover. So that would be bucket 3. Now, if you're thinking about a strategic plan for your organization for evaluation, you really need a bucketing system like this so that you use your always slim resources efficiently and wisely. Sometimes you'll hear people set targets for evaluation, evaluate 100% of your programs for reaction, 60% for learning or whatever. There's not any research. Those are entirely arbitrary targets, and there's not research to indicate that that's really a wise plan. So what we advise using our bucket system here is that you scope that evaluation in accordance to the value that that program delivers the organization. Okay, so when we're evaluating, if we're evaluating bucket 1 programs, as I said, then you only gather data and evaluate at the capability link. If, on the other hand, your programs target job performance and competencies, then we'd be gathering data and evaluating at both of these links. And if, on the other hand, your programs target organizational results, then you're gathering data at all 3 links and possibly conducting a return on investment study. However, as you're probably familiar with, conducting evaluation at these higher links is usually pretty difficult to do. It takes a considerable amount of time, resources, and expertise. When we conducted those 22 studies that Al told you about, most of the time, a quick study would be 8 months. Most took us about a year, many over a year, some tipping into 2 years. You're generally gathering data from your participants 2-3 times. Also from their managers, you're doing interviews with key informants, and you need a good deal of support for evaluation at these links because you're usually working across teams or departments or units, and you need a strong sponsor to open the door to get the support you'll need. And also, this kind of evaluation, particularly ROI, is very susceptible to bias. When we were doing these studies, we knew that if we changed a few assumptions here or there, ones that could go unnoticed, we could very easily flip a positive ROI negative or vice versa. When we completed those studies, the first 12 in fact, we worked with 12 really great teams across the country, and we partnered with them, and at the conclusion we said, okay, would you do another now? You've had your first experience with this, would you do another? Would you repeat the one we've just done? And no takers. In the second panel of 10, same response. Now, it wasn't because they didn't find the study credible or meaningful. We use the Phillips methodology, and we find it's very credible. We got few challenges, and all the stakeholders, those partners we were working with, found the results incredibly meaningful and useful. It's just that there aren't many opportunities in most organizations to conduct evaluation on this scale. So in view of that practical reality, our system strives to make the kind of evaluation you can do and may be doing now more meaningful and valuable than it currently is. So we do that by focusing on outcome measures at capability and job performance that are predictive, that give you a heads up as to whether or not you're on track to achieve those results you hope for at those higher links. So at capability, we focus on a small set of outcome measures that the research literature has indicated are among the most predictive of impact on the job and learning transfer. So we're using these capability outcomes as leading indicators predicting job performance. And if the likelihood of that transfer of learning and performance impact seems unlikely, then perhaps we can do something about it and be proactive. At job performance, we also focus our evaluation on a small set of outcomes that this time our stakeholders have agreed are most predictive of the organizational results we'd like to achieve. So again, we're using these job performance outcomes as leading indicators predicting our organizational results. I have to add an important caveat here, though. Your job performance outcomes will only be predictive of those organizational results to the extent that those two sets of outcomes have been appropriately and accurately aligned at the onset. And that's why we spend the time that we do in that important process of impact mapping. So if your programs are of a bucket 3 nature, and it's unlikely that you'll be able to evaluate at those higher links, our system is designed to give you a good indication of whether or not you're on track to achieve your results there. So to evaluate, you can gather that information through interviews or focus groups, but usually it's a questionnaire that's most expedient. So we developed questionnaires for our research, and we've continued to refine them over the last 10 years. It's a simple questionnaire, 7 questions, and Christine has those and can tell you more about them. I'm going to take a deep dive here because I think it's important for you to understand what those outcomes are that we look at capability, because capability is the anchor of that learning value chain, and you need good results here to trigger that chain of impact you hope to see. It's the fuse for all of this. So we build capability by enhancing our participants' knowledge, their skills, changing attitudes, developing new perspectives or beliefs. So learning is the key outcome we evaluate at capability. But I think most of you would agree that when we train, learning usually isn't our ultimate goal. Our ultimate goal is that those participants will use that training, that they'll apply it back on the job where it makes a difference to the way they do their job and hopefully the organization. So for that transfer of learning to occur, your training has to do more than just achieve its learning outcomes. It has to achieve outcomes that really set the stage for that learning transfer and application. And in our system, we call those enabling outcomes. And the first of these enabling outcomes is your participants' confidence in applying their learning after training, their confidence in their ability. And while learning is important, their confidence is equally important here. If they lack this confidence, then the transfer of training is at risk. And in the research literature, this is called post-training self-efficacy. And it's one of your best predictors of training transfer. In fact, some would argue that it's a better predictor than participants' learning scores or learning results. And I would agree. It's also important that your participants feel it will be possible to apply that learning back on the job in their specific job situation with their boss, with their team, with their workload, with their other priorities in their specific situation. And there's been a tremendous, 2-3 decades of research to demonstrate the powerful impact that these environmental variables, as they're called, have on training impact. And in our system, we call it workplace readiness, and we assess several dimensions here to predict training transfer. It's also important that your participants perceive value in that training, that they see it as credible, practical, and useful to their job. And again, there's a strong stream of research to suggest that these are essential preconditions to training transfer. And are they motivated to apply that learning? Your participants' confidence in their ability at the end of training, how they assess that workplace climate that they're going back to, the value that they attach to that training will all converge here to impact their motivation, either enhancing their enthusiasm or seriously dampening it. So this is your engine of transfer and clearly a good predictor of training transfer and impact at job performance. The outlook for training transfer becomes even brighter if that motivation comes with a plan. If at the end of training the participants have developed ideas, goals, plans for the when, where, or how they'll apply that training back on the job. If they lack those plans or ideas, it's highly unlikely or less likely that they'll occur to them in the days and weeks later. This process has to be begun during the training process. And again, strong research to indicate that when plans are developed, it's a better chance they'll be carried out. So, learning is the key outcome. We're evaluating it, capability, but these are our enabling outcomes because they indicate our participants' intentions to apply their learning. And they're equally important. Successful transfer of learning, the impact on the job depends on both of these sets of outcomes. Perceived value and plans for action are especially important when you're dealing with what's called open skills training. And open skills is the kind of training where your participants have a fair degree of autonomy or choice in the how, when, and where they apply what you've taught them, or whether they apply it at all. And this is true of leadership training, management, most of the soft skills training. And that's in contrast to what's called closed skills, which are more procedural, where your learners have only very little choice in how to do a task. There's usually only one way. So we use our participants' results and reactions in each of these areas to assess the extent to which we've built capability and laid that critical foundation for training transfer. But favorable results in all of these areas doesn't guarantee training transfer and performance impact. There are still other factors that come into play, most being learner characteristics. However, unfavorable ratings in any or all of these areas pose a significant risk to transfer. That's what we're looking for. So if we find a risk to transfer, what do we do about it here? To help you identify the source of problems and remedy them, we need to get under the hood of that training to figure out what's influencing learning and intentionality, what's working, what's not. And these are the categories of factors that research has shown to impact learning and intentionality outcomes. Probably not big surprises here. As part of our capability evaluation, we have what we call a diagnostic checkup, where we drill down in these different categories to assess the effectiveness of the instructional practices that we've employed, to pinpoint problems and identify areas of success. So again, we're trying to be proactive here. Okay, when I first started evaluating programs several decades ago, the idea was, you can probably identify with this, is to produce big reports, full of pie charts and appendices and pithy quotes. But every year since, my reports have gotten smaller and smaller and more visual. People don't want to read anymore, particularly senior management. So we knew that what our stakeholders needed was a good visual that communicated the key high-level results at a glance, a visual that immediately communicated what impact the program was having. So for that purpose, we developed our capability and job performance indices, and we've had a lot of success with these. Once again, they're simple. The capability index, we hope, provides a vivid snapshot of how the program is performing in those key outcome areas. So what we've done here is we've collected the data from our capability questionnaire and rolled it up in the colored bars that you see here. Red, yellow, green for low, moderate, and high impact. And you can see from this particular index, our participants seem to have learned. Jumping down there, they perceive value in this training. We've got almost 3/4 motivated to use it. But they also seem to lack confidence, and only about a little over half have left that training with solid plans for the how, when, or where they'll use it. Because we've chosen, remember, these outcome measures as leading indicators, our index gives us at a glance some indication of whether or not we're headed for success or failure here. And we have a very simple tool to generate these indices. Okay, this is the same index I just showed you. We evaluated a problem-solving program for a company, textile manufacturing, called Invista, one of the DuPont family. And as I said here, the program performed fairly well. We had some issues around confidence and plans for action, but the team addressed those. But I want to show you another index here. This is a program we evaluated Lean Six Sigma in a northern mining company, way up north there, and very, very similar curriculum. Dealt with much the same topics as what we were dealing with in Invista. Okay, but you don't have to read anything here, we hope. You can see at a glance this program's in trouble. And indeed it was. It had some very significant design issues. So we use a flagging convention, Al mentioned this in the intro, to alert stakeholders to risks to impact. A red flag, a more serious risk, a yellow flag, a more moderate risk. And in the northern mining, we pretty much flagged all of those outcome measures. But we identify these risks immediately after the training at an early stage, so hopefully we can do something about it to put that program back on track to achieve the impact at that job performance link. Okay, I'm going to move along the value chain here to talk about our evaluation at the next link. This is the impact on job performance. And at this point, your participants have left training, they're back at their work site, and what we're evaluating to find is, are they now applying that learning, and is it making a difference to their job performance? And that kind of evaluation, you've got a range of options for collecting data, but often a questionnaire is part of that mix. So we have developed questionnaires for participants and their managers, and once again, we've been fine-tuning these instruments for the last 10 years pretty much. What we evaluate at this point, these are the key outcomes. We look to see if our participants have applied their learning, how it's impacted their performance, but we also ask them to make some predictions, if this is a Bucket 3 program, as to whether or not they feel this training is contributing to the desired organizational results. We also ask about whether or not they found this to be a worthwhile investment for their organization. That's kind of a very soft ROI proxy. These other questions are diagnostics. We want to learn at this point what's enabled their transfer of learning to their job and improving their performance, or what the barriers have been. We ask a question about the efficiency of the solution, and again, we're assessing here the support practices that may have been put in place to either strengthen that transfer to the job or not. And as we did before, we also look under the hood again to find out what's supporting that transfer of learning to the job or inhibiting it. What factors are impacting that impact at job performance? And these are the categories of factors that research has shown to impact learning application and performance. So our diagnostic checkup again drills down in these categories to find out what's working or what's not. Okay, so this was the index I showed you earlier, our problem-solving program in textiles manufacturing, and we said they did pretty well, but there were some issues that they did address. So at job performance, we found out that about half the group were applying their knowledge and improving to a great extent. And what they did was they were able to apply their new problem-solving skills to projects in the plant, and they were able to reduce production costs, enhance productivity, and achieve a pretty healthy return on investment. But let's go back to Northern Mining here, okay? Remember, this was the case where we had serious concerns. We expressed those to the project team, the group who were implementing this, but I don't know, they were just convinced they'd be okay. This was Lean Six Sigma and it was going to work for them, so they didn't intervene. And here's the results at job performance, and the picture grows dimmer, as it always does, and yielding a deeply negative return on investment. That's the lowest you can get in terms of ROI. So it was when we began to see these indices as we worked through our studies, we began to see the predictive possibilities in our methodology. And when we completed the first 12, we conducted a meta-analysis just across all 12 to see why some succeeded or failed. And we found that those that failed to achieve a positive return had 10 times more red flags at capability. They had twice as many red flags at transfer. So at the end of the day, we feel pretty confident that we're asking the right questions here, and the questions with some predictive power. All right. Okay, so we like to think of our system as a Lego set. Many of the tools can be used independently or for different purposes. If you do choose to use all the tools, though, this is the story that the process tells. We see training as triggering a chain of critical outcomes, a learning value chain. We hope to build capability with our training, transfer that capability to impact job performance, and as a consequence of that change in job performance, trigger the desired organizational results. So in our first step, we develop an impact map, and the impact map identifies those key outcomes at each of those links. And here we bring in our stakeholders to get the buy-in and consensus on the choice of outcomes, as well as that critical alignment. We can also do our quality assurance review to assess designs before the more detailed development to ensure that there are no risks to impact and things we can catch early on that might be possibly changed before we go to development. Next, after training, we evaluate to see if our participants actually built their capability, which is both learning and intention. And in the index I showed you here, the program performed pretty well, but there were some issues that we thought were risks to transfer. So we flagged those issues so we can do something about it. Again, we're trying to be proactive. Then we evaluate when our participants are back on the job to assess not only their learning application, but also their performance improvement. And in that case, we found that, a little around half were applying their learning and improving to a significant degree. We still, however, have our diagnostics, and it gave us clues to how we can improve that impact at job performance. And then finally, in the wrap, our participants told us that they perceived this training as a worthwhile investment for the organization and that they could see it contributing favorably to the organizational results that they had hoped. Okay, so remember, you don't have to use all of these tools. Our goal, and we're quite serious about this, we're trying to make evaluation easy to do, not more labor-intensive. So what we've tried to do and worked hard at over the last years and continue to do so is to put together a tool set and a method that will help you better predict and then monitor and most critically improve the impact of your programs.
So we think of this as an evaluation model, but really also it's an impact management model. It's a model that you can actually use to make sure that your programs are driving strategy, are driving impact. And all those tools that Lynette has just mentioned will help you identify risks, drill down, and do things to make sure that your program gets the impact that you're looking for. That's it?
That's it.